Well, welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Right Down the Street. I'm Brian Barnett, Mayor of the City of Rochester Hills, and your host for this podcast. Excited to have a pretty good group of folks here today to continue the tradition of Right Down the Street. I've been doing this for a couple of years. The whole purpose of this is to tell the stories of the people that have had an impact in the greater Rochester community, and those that have gone on to do some amazing things. You're going to meet some incredible folks today. Excited to announce that coming off a pretty impressive 2023, where Right Down the Street ended up being in the top 25% of all podcasts in the country. So thank you, our listeners and our viewers, for paying attention and for telling others about what they've learned, certainly, hopefully, a little bit along the way. And we're excited to bring another exciting season for you this year. And let's get right at it. Today, we are joined by a handful of folks that you may have heard, watched, or cheered for in your career. We have three former professional hockey players. I use the term professional lightly with these gentlemen, and you'll see why in a minute. All have Detroit-Rochester Hills area connections, not just great athletes, but have continued to be great contributors to our community. The first gentleman I'm going to introduce you to is a Rochester resident, longtime member of our community. Craig Wolanin was the defenseman for 13 seasons in the NHL on 5 different teams. When he made his NHL debut, he was the youngest player in the history of the Devils franchise. A couple years ago, I imagine. Craig, excited to have you here. Great friend and a great leader in our community. Canadian Steve Guolla, currently a Rochester Hills resident, obviously my favorite since you're the only resident here at the table.
Thanks for having me.
Played center for Michigan State University, then played in the AHL and NHL over 9 seasons, wrapping up with an additional career, 7 seasons in Europe. Fantastic guy. We'll get into some of your fantastic stories and your engagement in the community. And finally, Dave Legwand, a center from Detroit, born in Grosse Pointe? Were you in Grosse Pointe?
Yeah, Grosse Pointe, Detroit area.
Grosse Pointe area. First player ever drafted by the Nashville Predators. Dave played 14 of his 16 full NHL seasons with Nashville, and when he retired, he held the Predators team records for games played, goals, assists, and points. So welcome to the show, Craig, Steve, and Dave. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Well, we're glad you guys are here. And I guess, they call Detroit Hockey Town. Obviously, we have tons of listeners and viewers that love the sport of hockey. And at some point, you guys all made it to the show. You had what anyone would describe as successful rides into the NHL and a great professional experience. But there had to be a moment early on in your career where you realized that hockey was something you were not only just excited in, but maybe had a chance to actually make something of it. Do you remember when that was, when the light turned on that you might be able to make a career in the NHL? Hey, Steve, start with you.
Well, first of all, these guys had great careers. They were both very high draft picks. I think top 3, both of them, and they played right away. So I was more of a journeyman type. I kind of developed later in Toronto, Canada. Played AAA for 2 years, played 1 year juniors, and I found myself coming down to Michigan State going the college route. So I was at that time just happy to play college. There was a lot of great players to play at Michigan State, and I just was trying to be one of them. I started realizing when I was there that some of the best players at Michigan State were making the NHL. I think at some point my junior year, I realized I was a pretty good player, and if those guys could make the NHL, maybe I could. So I was just kind of following those guys' footsteps, the Brian Smolinskis, Anson Carters, guys that were there, and I was just trying to keep getting better every year, and I was fortunate enough to make it and play a couple hundred games. So that was kind of my path and my way.
Sure, that's great. And Dave, you obviously, as Steve mentioned, you drafted pretty early.
Yeah, it was different. I mean, obviously every journey in life's different for everybody, and career-wise, and playing hockey, and whether it's hockey or you're a builder or whatever, it's different in every aspect of life. But mine was a little different to Steve, playing AAA growing up and playing 1 year in the OHL, and then going to Nashville where they didn't know what hockey was in Nashville in 1998. It was, sit down in your seats and put headphones on, and they would explain what icing was. And, it was a little wild down there. As NASCAR was on the Jumbotron during the intermissions and things like that. It was different, but, being there for 15 years, it was a long time. And to see the growth in the city, the game, the fans, the community, the team was going to move in 05, 06. It was going to move in 08, 09. It was for sale. It was not for sale. We played in 04 in the playoffs against the Red Wings, and and their payroll is $80 million, and theirs was $16 million before the salary cap and all that stuff. So things like that, it's crazy, and the journey to get there is, it's the journey to get there. It's not the destination at the end. It's the fun times, the meeting guys like Gooey and Wooly here, and yourself, and sharing stories of how people got to where they got to nowadays, and hearing the banter with hockey players and all that stuff is the fun things.
Dave, why were they going to move? They seem like such a successful franchise now.
I think it was 05, 06, and it was a little bit of a downturn in the fan support and things like that. And Jim Basile was the Blackberry CEO, and he wanted a team in Hamilton. He tried to buy Pittsburgh, and then he tried to buy Arizona, and then it was Nashville, and the league kind of shut them all down. And thank God for the town and the city. It stayed there. Craig Leopold, who bought the team, he now owns the Minnesota Wild, and Nashville's obviously in good hands now. Yeah. And 2016 when they went to the Cup Finals, I think that really solidified the franchise, the organization.
They're a booming city, and across all metrics, they clearly love their sports there. Yeah, and they've become kind of a downtown arena. I mean, as close as you can get to Broad Street. Or
the Broadway is quite the time on Broadway. Obviously.
Well, maybe we'll get to some of your best Broadway stories in a minute. But wow. Craig, your NHL debut at 18. That's crazy. 18. Most folks are just thinking about graduating high school, and you're starting in the NHL. What was that like?
Well, it was interesting because all three of us coach, and 14 and 15-year-olds. I quit when I was 15 for a year because I had just had enough of it. And I was never pressured into playing. It was just something that a lot of it had to do with coaching and what have you, and you just get burnt out. And so I quit for a year, and I started playing again basically when I was 16, and just started having fun with it. And 17, I was drafted. Played my first game at 18 in 2 months, so I don't know if we could say this on a podcast or not. I barely had pubic hair. I mean, I literally just saw the draft footage yesterday, and I was just so young, and we didn't really aspire. Like, we didn't aspire to play hockey. We kind of dreamed of it, but we never had aspirations, I think, like the kids do today. We just played, and if success got in the way, I think you're willing to take it. But
so as an 18-year-old, who are you looking up to? Who are some of the players that shaped your desire to follow them into the NHL, assuming they were NHL players?
Well, back then, right, when I was growing up, Hockey Night in Canada was big in the Detroit area. So you saw Toronto and Montreal more so than you did Detroit. I would think a guy like Boreas Salming on Toronto was a defenseman, the position that I played. He was always one of the perennial all-stars for them. And then Larry Robinson for the Montreal Canadiens was a kind of a big, an idol of mine. And then eventually I got to play with Guy Lafleur in Quebec, who was, his nickname was the Legend. And when I got to play with him, you knew why, because in Quebec, the province of Quebec, he was beloved. And so those three guys were pretty influential on it.
How about you, Dave?
Well, being from here, obviously, in the Stevie Eiserman in Detroit, it's kind of, he's a god, he's a legend, and then you had guys like Sergei Fedorov, and even Konstantinov being a defenseman. I was a forward, but it's guys like that kind of reshaped the whole organization, the franchise. And Steve in the 80s would get 140, 150 points a year. It wasn't until he changed his game that Scotty Bowman came in, he changed his game and played two ways, and they started winning 60 games a year, winning Stanley Cups, and being that that Colorado, Dallas, Detroit rivalry for the next 10 years, whatever you call it, in the mid-90s. And the Devils were in there with that whole thing. And so probably him mostly with the being a captain for 20 years, and in one city for 20 years, and going from the dumps to Mike Ilitch was buying cars for the fans and trying to get people to go to the games. And then now you look at the fan base, it's never going anywhere. It's a passion. It's a way of life. It's all those things.
Steve, how about a little different question for you? How about in terms of a player you played with? You have either a favorite player or a player that you enjoyed playing with, or someone that just kind of inspired you along your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Toronto. We all liked the Leafs. They were terrible when I was growing up, but we all loved them. But when Wayne Gretzky came to town, we would all. I mean, I remember buying cheap gray seats and old Maple Leaf Gardens going to the top and just watching him to come play. Like he was the man growing up, and we would all go watch him whenever we can or whenever he was playing. That's all everybody talked about. I mean, he just set records, whether it was when he was 9 years old or when he was like 21 years old. So, but when I came down to Michigan, I became a big Red Wings fan. Yeah. You get to meet a lot of the guys when you're skating around here, and you just appreciate how good they were and the culture around here. So I became a Red Wings fan once around Michigan State time and after.
Yeah. Now, hockey players have kind of this unique reputation in sports, right? They're these kind of your everyday Joe. I mean, they work hard. They're tough folks. They have a massive fan base, but they don't seem to have. Basketball players, NFL players, these massive contracts can't go anywhere. NHL players sort of feel like you're part of the team, part of the family. What are some of the misconceptions about being a professional hockey player that you think maybe aren't exactly true? The media gets it wrong, or fans get it wrong. What are some of the biggest misconceptions out there, Craig?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. My era of player, like it's funny, a couple of years, there's literally eras in the hockey world, right? Mike Madonna was only a few years behind me, but I had never heard of him until he was the first pick overall. I think he was first pick overall, right, from Westland. But, my era, it kind of used to be everybody was kind of blue-collarish, right? Like it's, that's what everybody had, a blue-collar work ethic. And then if you had some skill and a little bit of will on top of that, you may have moved forward. So I think the misconception maybe these days is that everybody needs to be highly skilled to be an accomplished player. And in my opinion, what a lot of the kids are missing these days is a little bit more will than skill. So, but that was something that we brought to the table because our parents expected it. Yeah. Otherwise, you did not play.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Steve, thoughts on that?
I just think that's a really good point. I never really thought of it that way, but I agree with that. I think the kids have more skill than they ever had. But I don't know if they watch hockey as much or played road hockey growing up. Maybe they don't understand the game as much, but they're more skilled than they ever been. So in a way, they're almost dumber on the ice. I don't want to say that word because they're still really smart and they're great players. And we're talking about coaching 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds. We used to watch hockey every day, and I'd play road hockey every day, and that's all we did. And I think there was a little more of that is missing. But these kids are so skilled, more skilled than I remember being.
Sure.
He was pretty skilled, but I would just say that.
Yeah. So you've had these incredible careers. I mean, I don't know what the percentages is, but it's a the 10% that ever get to play professional sports. You all, from various roads, made it there and obviously accomplished it. And you think about this now, having your careers behind you. Was there a moment? Was there a game? Was there a goal? Was there one moment where you just sort of like, if you had one story to tell, it's going to be this one because it's the one that's most memorable or impactful? I'll start with you, maybe, Dave.
No, I don't think there's one. I think it's a you could piece together maybe 10 or 15 moments where you're like Craig just said he quit hockey at 15 and took a year off. It's Gooey was a different journey down the road. He took the college to the American League to playing in the National Hockey League, and there's probably 10 stories that he has of, oh my God, that game in Toronto where I had 2 goals, or X, or I won the OHL Cup, or I won the GTHL championship, or a Michigan State championship when you're 15, 16 years old. You don't know when that time is and the defining moment of your career and those types of things. So I mean, obviously, a memory like your first games, a big memory.
What was your first goal?
In Toronto on Glen Healy in 1999. So it was actually, won the game, a minute and a half left. So it was pretty exciting. I was 19 years old, just turned 19. So
there you go.
That's all good stuff. My first game I was 18 years old against the New Jersey Devils. They had Scott Stevens and Scott Niedermeyer and Marty Brodeur, and you went in there and I was just like, I just was still in high school to get out of high school, and I'm going to Nashville to play a hockey game. It's kind of like, whoa. Yeah. This is real life, and your buddies are all going to ride their bikes, and you're getting on an airplane to go play a hockey game. It was a little. It's a little different.
Still banana seat.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first goal?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they played more games. I played a couple hundred games. I probably watched another 50 from the press box, having hot dogs and popcorn. But I got called up to San Jose in '97. I played 3 games, and I thought I played pretty well, but I hadn't got any goals or assists, and I was trying to be an offensive player in the NHL. And so the 4th game, we had a home game against Phoenix, and I got a nice backdoor pass from Jeff Friesen, and I scored on Happy Bulin. So I felt really good, and I was able to parlay that. And a few weeks later, they had a Canadian road trip. I got to play in Toronto, which I'd always wanted to play Maple Leaf Gardens. And we went to Ottawa, and all my family came that game. And I remember scoring 2 goals that game. And as he said, I might remember some of that. I got first star of that game, and I was like, I kind of made it. I kind of made it to the NHL. So it was pretty wild.
I know your son tells a story about your hat trick too, right? And
not in the NHL, never had a hat trick, so he's fibbing
lying
to his friends. Yeah,
that's good to know.
that's a good kid.
That is good. Craig, you remember your first goal?
I pretty much remember all of them. I probably had a cumulative hat trick in my 13 years. I do.
How about your first fight then?
Probably not, because I was probably knocked out. I do remember my first goal, and it was in Minnesota. I don't remember the goalie, to tell you the truth. It was 1985, December. But I do remember the 3 stars. I was the first star because I had a goal and 2 assists. Dave Lewis, who is my defense partner, former assistant coach for the Red Wings, was the second star, and then Dino Cicerelli, who are all Michigan residents now, was a 3rd star. What I remember most about that first star, to Goo's point earlier about playing road hockey, I'm not much into memorabilia, and so I had my first goal plaque put up in the garage when we lived in Lake Orion. And my son was young, and he literally chipped the Minnesota North Star puck off the plaque. It was using it to shoot around in the garage. So I don't even know where that puck is, but that's what I remember about my first goal, really.
You can't talk hockey. Obviously, a big part of it about, some of the fights, the scrums. I mean, it's an exciting part of the game. Fans love it. Any memorable squabbles you've been in, or players that were really known for it, or someone that you, every time you got on the ice, you squared off and dropped the gloves?
No, not really. And I think the games, obviously, he played in the 80s and 90s, and it's changed a bit. They're still fighting. They're still. I'm an advocate not for fighting, but I think there's a place for it in the game. At certain points of the game, I think Sheldon Keefe came out yesterday or today and said that more guys are getting hurt with these bad hits than they are in the fight. So I think there's a place for it. I didn't do much of it, try to stay away from it. But when I first came in the league, Bob Proberts were still around, and there was, your 10th, 11th, 12th forwards were basically the guys that were going to go out there, and if something stupid happened, and it would get fixed, and you would do it amongst yourselves, and you wouldn't go to the league and someone gets suspended for 5 games, and they would go out there and handle it themselves. Which, in junior hockey, we had a couple. So my first coaches in junior hockey were Pete DeBoer and Steve Spott, who are now coaching the Dallas Stars. And Craig Steffen was their one assistant, who was – Steffer's a little nutty, and we had a little brawl before the game even started with no refs on the ice, and he was running across the ice in his shorts and his T-shirt trying to break it up. And it was right at USA Hockey Arena when the Plymouth Whalers were there, so it was pretty interesting, but that was one of the stories that I will always remember.
You guys have taken your passion for hockey from being players and now all coach, right? You all coach. Some of you coach your kids or have coached your kids. I know you've gotten into ownership, but your son, Christian, is kind of following in your footsteps, hockey player. I mean, what's it like to have a son kind of follow? And I imagine that's got to be both exhilarating and also challenging to know how tough of a road it is.
Well, you asked kind of about the memories that we have, and it's really, to me, it's been much more fun watching Christian's journey, because his journey would be similar to Goo's. If we all have a path, his has been all over the place, and I'm proud of him because it's never been easy. And he continues to love the game, and he's in Vancouver's system now in the American Hockey League. These guys would know he converted to play defense at 17 years old, which is a really, really late time to do it. And last year he was American League Defenseman of the Year. And so, which is, I can't tell you how proud, because it's just really hard. So if you call my route easy, as I tell them, first round picks, you're like a cat, right? Everybody thinks you can play, so you just keep going from team to team to team to team. But with lower round picks, or he was drafted as a 19 or 20-year-old, you don't have those opportunities. You got to create them, and your opportunity to create them is a very, very small window. So I've gotten more joy watching him. And now that we speak about hockey together, just coaching the kids, it's fun. I have the benefit of hindsight. Now he comes back to me with certain things. Remember, Dad, when you said when you were coaching us at Caesars when I was 14? I love those opportunities because now he knows more than I do. Yeah. And we just talk it through, and I ask him what his coaches are thinking. So I've gotten more enjoyment watching him than I probably did in my own career, because you're just so invested in it. You just kind of go through it.
Steve, you're coaching too now. Who are you coaching?
Yeah, so that's kind of funny, a couple of these stories. I coach Oakland Junior Grizzlies. Craig's over there as well, and then he's down at Little Caesars. And we actually play this Saturday, the semifinals against Little Caesars, and his team plays Little Caesars as well. So it's all kind of fun. They're a great bunch of kids. I actually coach against Greg Stefan. That was kind of funny. Maybe I'll use that against him. He coaches the Comptoir team now. He's still around coaching. He's a good guy. Pretty funny, like he said. I just really enjoy it. I got to coach Tyler for 5-6 years out of the Oakland Grizzlies, because they have a AA program and AAA, and we coached Tyler there, and he got to play Rochester High 2 years before he went to Michigan State. Now he's playing frat league up there, and he's loving hockey. It's great to see him love the game that I love so much and grew up. Then Brady's playing, and he's doing pretty good, and we'll see if he's good enough to play some juniors, or maybe get to college, which I think he wants. But I'm just trying to have fun with him and not let him feel pressure about it, and just enjoy this time together. I'm not going to coach him next year. I think it's time for him to have another voice and not have his dad coach his team. So that'll be interesting for me to be on the other side of the glass watching him. Probably want to say something, but I think it's the right time. But I've really enjoyed it. And last year was the first year of nationals. We won the state tournament. We went to nationals. So we'll always have that great memory together. We have a chance to do it this weekend, but the teams are really good. So we'll give it the old college try. We'll see what happens.
And Dave, you of course played, coached, and you've also taken another interesting run. You are in ownership, right, up in Sarnia?
Yes. So we myself and Darian Hatcher bought the team in 2015, and then I was still actually playing in Buffalo at the time, so wasn't very well invested. Kind of really didn't know what was going on. Knew my playing career was coming to an end, kind of, sort of, and wanted to get into something that was involved in hockey. And went to Rob and Larry Cicerelli, who owned the team at the time, and asked if they'd be willing to sell it. And everything kind of worked out as planned. And now Darian's out of the team and kind of own it on my own. And it's fun. It's not a ton of work, but it's more than I probably thought. But we have it's a full blown operation, I guess you could call it, at the way lesser size of the Detroit Red Wings. I mean, it's there's 4,500 people at the games, and
you got media, you got people questioning where you're at in the playoffs, or if you're gonna make the playoffs, how decisions you're making,
coaches and GMs and trade deadline and the draft and all those things. So it's so fun, though. I mean, it's like these guys said, the kids are 16 to 20 years old at that level. They're going through, big things in their lives, changing things in their lives, girls, school, hockey,
leaving
home, managing themselves, living with another family that's, they're going to live there for 3 or 4 years. That's going to become their second family, and then, we have these things, the trade deadline comes, and a 16-year-old, you don't know if you're trading them or moving them. And it's, it's a lot for these kids to handle. And a lot of them are very mature beyond their years. And, you give them credit for that. They learn on the fly. They got to take it as it comes. And it's funny. We have one kid on our team now. His dad played for the Red Wings, Lucas Fisher, and it's Yuri's son. And he was in the USHL, and he called us last year in October, and he said, "I'm leaving Cedar Rapids. I want to come play in Sarnia." And I said, "Okay, well, what do your parents think about it? Are they okay with it?" He goes, "I don't care. I just want to play hockey. That's all I want to do is play hockey." And God bless him. He's put in the work. He's put in the time, and he's probably going to be a first-round NHL pick coming up in June. following his dad's footsteps, which is pretty cool to see. And obviously Craig knows that with Christian, and everyone aspires to have their kids do what they can the best way possible in life, and whether it's sports or business or work or whatever, they want their kids to succeed.
Hockey is the name of the game today. I'm Brian Barnett, Mayor of the City of Rochester Hills. This is Right Down the Street. We've got 3 NHL players with us today, all with a local connection. We talked about the trade deadline. I think it comes up on Friday. You all been traded? What's that like? That's not a normal thing in most people's career, either being traded or cut. I mean, it's a lifestyle change. Talk about that for a minute. Who was traded? Who was cut? Trade deadline's Friday.
I was
the above?
Yeah. So I was in Nashville for 15 years, and we weren't going to make the playoffs, and David Poyle Barry Trotz was leaving also in the summer, and it was kind of weird. I played there so long, and I had one coach the whole time in Nashville, which is pretty wild, as coaches are usually the first guy to get fired, as you can fire one coach and not 20 players. But they came to me and said, "You want to get traded?" I said, "Well, there's one." I had a no movement clause, and I said, "There's one place that I would play, and that's the Detroit Red Wings." And I think Zetterberg was hurt and Datsuk was hurt, and they were on their playoff streak of 22 or 23 years, whatever it was, and it was 11 o'clock on a Thursday or something, and the deadline was at 2. And you're on your phone with the agent, and you're on your phone with this person, and then you're on the phone, you're calling your mom and dad, and I think it happened at 1:30. The deadline's at 2, and I'm like on a plane the next day, and then we get home and they're playing Colorado, retiring Nick Lidstrom's jersey, and I'm just like, whoa, this just happened. And you still have your house in Nashville and all your other things going on, and it's like you got to get all this stuff back, and then you got to go do this, and then you got to go do that. So it's a whirlwind tour, but it's about being professional, and it's part of the game, and it's honestly I don't know if we can say it's kind of a part of the game, but
we can now.
At that level, it turns into a business, and teams want to have the best teams, and they want to go as far as they can in the playoffs. So,
been traded, Steve?
Yeah, I've all of the above. I think I was traded from San Jose with a big group. It was a late Chumber was part of that trade. We went to Tampa together, so I knew Burzy from a couple of teams. God rest his soul, because I like Burzy. He was one of the funniest guys I ever met in my life. But and I've been sent down and called up numerous times from the minors. And after I had spent a year in Tampa, one day was a weird day. Like there were so many players that year, and it was in early March. It was around the trade deadline. And we didn't really have a pregame skate. Nobody knew who was playing. Nobody was going on. I didn't know if I should skate after, if I was playing. I went and ate with the guys. I had lunch, and I just kind of took my time, made a couple stops, and I went back to my apartment in Tampa. I pressed back then, the tape recorders with the message, and it was like, "Hey, Steve, this is Jay, the assistant GM," and he was a swell guy, actually, Jay Fisher, and he was like, "Yeah, you've been claimed by Atlanta. Your flight leaves at like 4:30, and you're gonna be there, and they're gonna meet you, and you're gonna play tomorrow for the Atlanta Thrashers." I was like, "Oh, okay." I think I had about 40 minutes to pack 2 bags, lock up my thing, ask my neighbor to watch the apartment, and just get to the airport and get to Atlanta, play for Atlanta the rest of the year. I mean, I was happy to be in the NHL. I wasn't complaining.
Sure.
It was pretty funny. I had no idea.
Greg, any good stories on this?
Well, Sean Byrne and I roomed together in Kitchener.
Did you?
Yeah. Yes, this is funny, actually. My first team was New Jersey, and Jim Korn used to be a Red Wing player. He was on our team in New Jersey. And Jim and I used to drive together to the morning skates. So I'm going there, and the rumors were that I was going to be traded or what have you. So Jimmy had been in the league about 11 years at that point. He said, well, if we're both here after the morning skate, we're both pretty good. So I did not ride to the games with him. So after we do our little thing in the afternoon, I'm driving to the game, and I'm getting ready to go on for warm-ups. And I look across the locker room, and I'm like, where'd Jimmy go? He got traded to Calgary. So I continue getting dressed. I'm like, man, that's terrible news. Continue getting dressed. And all of a sudden, Kirk Muller, who is our captain, comes to me and says, Coach needs to see you. So I go see the coach, and he said, you've been traded. We think you've been traded. I'm like, you think I have? It's 3 or 4 hours past the deadline. They had a problem with the fax machine. Yeah. the dot matrix fax machine I had a problem with it. So I didn't play that day, and I got traded to Quebec the next day. So
you ended up winning following that, they moved to Colorado and you ended up winning a Stanley Cup there, right?
yeah, I was nobody wanted to play in Quebec at that time. But I loved it. You know, these guys have experienced the Pee Wee tournament in Quebec. They call this hockey town. It kind of pales in comparison to any Canadian town, but I really, really like Quebec. And back then, they had such a good young team with probably 6 or 7 Hall of Famers eventually. So I loved it there.
Well, as we roll to a close here, a couple quick questions, and just want to get your opinion. You guys have all obviously experienced great success in the NHL. You've moved on to other careers. What's one lesson you've learned from your experience that you've taken on in your post-NHL life? Start with you, Steve.
That's a good question. I don't know. Listen, I think hockey, you learn to get along with your teammates. You do a team concept, so we can do anything in life, working with others, competing for goals, and working with others, and no matter how we're different. You're competitive. You're adaptable. We've been thrown around. We've been traded. Things have happened and changed so fast for us. I like to think we have fun too. We get along. We always have good humor and good camaraderie, good stories. We're always joking around from hockey days and shoe checking each other and putting food on our shoes underneath the table when we're eating lunches. That's beside the point. But I just think we're very adaptable, very competitive, and we can kind of fit in different industries. I had to get a job when I retired from Finland in 2011. I was fortunate enough to land a job in medical device sales working for Stryker, and I've now been working for them for 13 years, so I'm pretty fortunate. I love working for that company. And I think having the background of playing a college sports and playing professional and living all over helped me get that job to work with them. So I'm pretty thankful and pretty fortunate, and had a lot of people help me along the way, which I was pretty fortunate with.
Dave, one lesson the NHL taught you?
There's the old one. What is it? 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Listen and watch. Talk less. I mean, as young players, we all went in the league. Obviously, Craig was the first one, and I'm sure back then when he went in, it was very veteran-oriented. And when you're a younger person, you be like a sponge and soak it all up and those types of things. But the same thing as Gooey, the hard work. And if you put the work in and the time, the good things will happen to you, and you do things the right way. Don't be a bad human, a bad person, and do things the right way. You know, please and thank you go a long way. It's the simple sayings in life, I think, that will give you success in a sport, which is a hard profession to get into, business, whatever you're doing, medical device sales or coaching or helping kids or like you do, helping people all over the world and in this city of Rochester Hills. So being a good person and doing the right things and put a smile on your face, I think, is the easiest thing to do.
Greg, big lesson? One lesson learned?
Well, the boys hit on it. I mean, there's many lessons. It's just what's applicable to you at that time. I think we were fortunate. I think for me, it was kind of respect to Dave's point about the elders. Like, and we had the perfect guy here in Rochester Hills, and Ted Lindsay. Yeah. I mean, if it, Ted, to me, I would consider him a friend. And if it weren't for guys like Ted, I mean, he literally laid the path for all of us, and the Players Association going. I mean, so I have the utmost respect for guys like that. And but one thing that stuck with me, because Lindsay had kind of sent some of the questions to us. One thing that I learned: when did the Red Wings win with Babcock? 2008. Yes. I had coached Mikey, Mike's son, and I remember after the Red Wings won. Mike Babcock, Coach Babcock, was already on to the next season. I mean, he had just hit the pinnacle of his career, and he was already looking to what they could do to repeat next season. So with that, I thought there's a saying that says success doesn't fulfill. And, I mean, you're always chasing the next success. You reach one, you're always going after it. And pretty soon that road gets long, and your quest becomes more and more difficult. But it's fleeting, the whole career thing, whether you play 20 years or 2 games, it's fleeting, and you need to enjoy it.
Well, this has been awesome. We always end By the way, this is the first time we've ever had 4 amazing athletes on the show at one time. So
I've seen your golf game, you know that.
it's a big thing for right down the street. We always end our podcast with the same question for everybody that we've ever had on. It's a 2-parter. Both parts are important. Short answers. Number 1, if you could have lunch or dinner with any individual, alive or past, who would it be? And equally as important, where would you take them? I'm going to start with you, Craig.
Alive or
past.
I'd probably just keep it simple. I'd say my grandma. She's a wonderful lady. I think she's been gone a long time now, but I would say her. As my mom starts to age a little bit, you start to kind of see all that stuff. But I'm going to go with my grandma, Grandma Kay.
And where would you take Grandma Kay?
Well, we'd have to go somewhere in Hamtramck, probably, Polish Village Cafe or something like that.
All right. Steve?
That's a good answer. First of all, I just want to say thanks for having me on, and thanks for all your friendship over the years, and thanks for everything you do around here in Rochester. I'm still sad I'm Canadian, can't vote for you, but I would. You have my vote.
Wait, you can't vote?
I had your sign in my lawn, you know that. But I really appreciate everything you do for the community. It's a great place to live and grow up and have our kids, so I appreciate that. I went down the same path. My mom passed away in 2013 with Alzheimer's. I would love to have dinner with my mom. Maybe take her to the bingo after she loved the bingo. And I never really did that. Always playing hockey and then leaving at 18. So I'd love to spend a night with my mom.
Sure.
I would.
Dave?
I go off the family thing. I think, and Michael Jordan's someone that the drive that human had and to do things that he did and continue to do things he does, whether it's obviously he's the greatest basketball player ever, quits basketball for 3 years, goes and plays baseball, and then comes back and plays basketball, and then now he owns a basketball team and a car racing team and this team and that. It's just to sit down and understand how he did that and thought of that at that time in the world when it was 1988 or 86, whatever it was, pretty crazy to me. I don't know where I'd take him. I'd probably ask him for some options, and to hear some of his stories would be pretty wild.
He's got a restaurant, I think. So
I'm sure he's probably got a lot of them. But again, just the same as Goose said, thank you for everything you do for us and the people of the state of Michigan, not just Rochester and all around the country. Obviously, you got pretty big shoes to fill. So anytime you need anything from us, we're always available for you.
Well, I appreciate that. This community loves hockey. I've had the privilege of getting to know each of you kind of uniquely. I didn't even know if you all knew each other, but just different relationships with each of you. And so it's so fun for us and for those in the audience who get to kind of peek in for a moment to see what it was like in the career, how it starts, what it's like on the way in, and what it's like after. And you guys have really given us a great opportunity to see that. Thank you, all 3 of you, for being here. Thanks for being good friends, and thanks for being on the show. And to those of you in our audience, thanks for joining us. If you like what you've heard, please follow or subscribe, rate and review. We especially like those good ones. Those things really help us continue to grow our audience. We are excited to be back very soon with another exciting episode of Right Down the Street. Until then, thanks for joining us, and as always, God bless.